This time I'm going to show you how I made this card, which is called All Tied Up. Obviously this isn't a card, it's a photocopy of the card, the originals with Wendy. So to make this card I used the vintage bauble stencil, so the middle stencil in that set, and I also used the nice-Icles and Icicles, the two pine branches in this set. The light up the night, I'm going to use this little branch here and the mice. And I'm going to use the vintage bulb set. So I'm going to use this one here, which is the medium-sized one, and the very small one you can see in the corner there. Okay, so I'm just going to put those to one side and we'll get going. So what I'm going to do first of all, sorry, I'll just move that into the light. I'm going to put my pine branches across the top because that's what the ball is going to be suspended from. So what I'm going to do is just I'm using a versafine clair. Now the reason I'm using this is because you can put colour on top of it and blend, and it won't, once it's dry, it won't move. This one is actually called Fallen Leaves. So I'm just going to stamp this branch up, and I don't want it really dark, so I'm just going to lay off that ink onto there and then just make the shape I want going across the top. So coming off the page, I have one there, and then I'm just going to carry that on, ink it up, sorry, just move that ink it up, stamp it off onto a piece of paper, and then that way. I'm just putting a little bit of sort of shape into this, and then we can have it coming down at the end, and then we're going to have it coming right off the page like that. I think that's probably enough, because what we're going to do now is fill it in with our pine branches. So I'm using this one first, and I'm going to be using Versafine Clair Shady Lane for this, for the same reason that if you want to blend over it, once this is dry, you can do that. So I'm doing exactly the same, just to show you. I'm going to ink it up and tap in. And this time I'm not going to lay off the ink. I'm going to directly stamp onto here, but I'm also going to secondary stamp. So we get those different shades of the green, and then move along and do it the other way around. And then you just keep moving along the branch. One in the middle that time, I think. And then off the page, maybe a little bit dark off the page. So that's that branch. And then the other one in the set, again, I'm going to try not to stamp too much of this twiggy base, because you can see it's quite strong. So a little bit, it works really beautifully, because you can just, it looks like it's coming off the branch like that, but we don't want the flat bit at the end. So just be careful how you ink it up, and then we'll have those coming down from there. Maybe another one across the top there like that, and then off the page there like that. And I think we'll probably have a little bit more coming out from there, just to give that a little bit more shape. Let me have a look there. So this is all a matter of you just deciding by eye where you're going to fill the gaps in, and then again you can secondary stamp this to get that nice contrast in the colours. So especially if you've only got a few ink pads, this is a good technique. It works quite well. I think that's probably enough. And then what I would do is just with a dry baby wipe, just pick up the residual ink that you have on there. Now this is, there won't be a lot on this because versafine clair, I say once it dries it doesn't blend, which is great when you want to do over the top of it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the Versacraft pine, just a tiny little bit on my baby wipe, and just go along the middle a little bit, not too much, just go along the middle there like that, just to fill in the wire a little bit. Okay, I think that's fine. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is, into that I've taken the little bulb stamp and I'm going to stamp this in versafine nocturne randomly along our pine branch. So what you need to try and do here is get your bulb into the places where there's not obviously so much ink, and you know, do it, turn them around. They'll be on they're going to be on a string, and don't worry, you see I've just marked that piece of paper, but I've got a resolution for that, so don't worry about that. These are things that happen all the time when you're crafting, and yeah, there's always a way around them. That's my excuse anyway. So we just need perhaps one down there right at the end, and I think we'll put one in this direction hanging there, one in the middle, and I think that's probably enough. Okay, so let me put that out of the way, and I'm just going to wipe my hands. Now what I'm going to do, because I made that little mark there, I'm probably going to put a little mouse up there holding the string. So I'm just going to use my pine branch again, just to extend that up in nearer that mark. So we'll do it from, I think, that direction like that. And there's another one there, so I'm just going to cover that up. Okay, now I'm just going to cover my black up so I don't dip my fingers in it again. And I'm going to take my fineliner. This is a 03, anything up to 05 will do. And then I'm going to take the string from here, and then you just join up your lights. Now I'm going to put a bit up there, which you'll see why in a minute. And then that's going to come down to there. And then obviously you just have to follow where you've placed your... You don't have to be too accurate about this because you can hardly see it amongst the pine branches. And if you make a mistake, just stamp over it with a pine branch. I think that's okay. And then I'm going to take one of my little mice, stamp him up in nocturne black, give him a good stamping. Now I think I've told you before with these little stamps, give them a good ink in, because when you stamp, you just want to gently press down. Don't press down too hard because they've got lots of little details. You see like there is, and you don't want to lose that detail by pressing too hard on the stamp. And now you can see why I've put the thread up there, because it's actually coming through his hands down to the lights. Now to colour the lights, I'm actually going to use gel pens. I've got 3 colours here. Now you can do whatever you like. You can either do the ink technique, like splodging the ink and painting in, which I've shown you in other videos, or you can use whatever you have. They do coloured Posca pens. You can use those. Now I'm using 3 colours, so I'm going to miss 2 and then colour the next one. So I say it's entirely up to you which way you colour these. But you want them to be quite strong colours, because amongst the pine branches, if you do them too pale, they won't show. So I'm going to use the blue next, and I mean, it doesn't really matter if you don't do it in order, and 3 is always a good number. For some reason the eye accepts 3 quite easily, so that's a good plan to follow. If you haven't got 3, well then just alternate what you have got, or if you'll mix them, you can always make different colours by mixing your inks up. And then the last one there, Okay, now when they're dry, I'm going to put a little white oh, I made a bit of a mess of that one there, look, going over. So again, what I'm going to do is get one of my pine branches, just the very tip, and I'm just going to do that so it hides it a little bit. I'm going to go put little white highlight marks on there, but I'm going to wait for that gel ink to dry first. So now we move on to our baubles, and really where you place the baubles is entirely up to you, but this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to have this one hanging here like that. I'm going to have this one hanging down from there, and then the smaller one in the middle. So we're going to do them one at a time because obviously we don't want to lose the space. So I'm just going to tape this down to make it a little bit easier for me with a little bit of tape. And the first one I've chosen a Versacolor raspberry. Now you can use Versacolor on these because you're not going to mix anything over the top of them. So obviously you can choose whatever colours you like. Then we go, just like I showed you in the last video, you start off going all the way around the bauble. This time, just miss the little cap there because we're going to do those in gold. So and then blend that in with your dry baby wipe. And then keep blending from the outside in. Again, I'm going to leave a white middle to reflect the light. So once we've got sort of roughly the shape of that and where you're going to leave the white bit, then you can just carry on with the colour. And really it's entirely up to you how much colour you add or not. I find when you're doing plain coloured baubles, it's you can really please yourself, but I think the darker you do the outside, the shinier it looks. Now the other thing I'd tell you with the baby wipes I'm using, you get these little striations sometimes you can see, which to be honest we don't really want in this particular bauble. So when I've finished putting the ink on, I'm going to see if I can blend that out a little bit. So we just keep working our way around. I'm going to put a little bit more around that side, a little bit more at the top. I think that's nearly done. Just a little bit more around there, I think. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a blending brush, just going to make sure there's no other colour on it, and just work that in a little bit. And what that does is just smooth that off a little bit where I've got those marks on my baby wipes. So if you have the same trouble with your dry baby wipes, this is a good idea. You just keep a couple of brushes for this technique, just to blend them in a little bit. And I think we're nearly there. Yeah, I think that's fine. And then while the stencil's on there, I'm going to go around it with the black fineliner again. Just hold on to your stencil, because sometimes when you're putting pressure on it, it can lift a little bit. So that's, don't know what happened there, went a bit wonky there. And then these little pieces, and of course the bit that holds it up. Now you can carry on, do that light and dark, as light and dark as you want to, but obviously I'm a bit stuck for time, so I'm going to, I think that's enough for the purpose of the video. So then we take our second one, which is the medium-sized bauble from the vintage bulb, and we're going to have that, I think, hanging about there, because we want it to hang from the branch. So in the previous one I did it up there, but because obviously when you stamp your branches, that they don't always come out in the same position, so I think we're going to put that one there, and I'm just going to tape that one down like that. And for this one I'm going to be using Versacolor heliotrope, which is a lovely sort of mauve colour, and we do exactly the same thing again. So we go round the bauble like this. You see a lovely rich mauve that is, really pretty colour. And I think this time, because of the shape of it, I'm going to leave the white centre a little bit further up, so there, and then colour that right to where that goes, where it goes lighter, and then follow that round the top. Like that. And just make sure you define the edges nicely. And then blend that in. And because this is a lighter colour, the striations on the baby wipe haven't really made any difference this one, so we don't need to blend over the top of it. Obviously it's up to you if you want to. I think we're just going to make that a little bit more random. It's a bit too round, so I'm just going to shade off a little bit of that and the other side, just to make it a little bit more of a random shape. Okay, and then we do exactly the same. I'm just going to put the lids on my ink so I don't put my fingers in them. And then we do exactly the same. We draw around the edge with our black fineliner, and then the top of the bulb again like that, and that little section there. And again, as you can see, this one's slightly different. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of colour to this section here. So I'm going to take my heliotrope and then just carefully I'm going to colour in that top section there. And then just run the fine line around it again just to define it. Okay. So then we're going to remove that tape carefully. And then we have our second bauble. And then the last one, I'm just wiping my hands, getting rid of the ink on my hands. Now, obviously this bauble is on this stencil. And I think for the purpose of this one, I think we're going to have this right in the middle. Just move my inks back. We're going to put it there. Just make sure it's, because you can see through your stencil, so you can line it up properly. I think that's fine there. And then I'm just going to now obviously you're using the whole stencil here, so just be careful when you're shading, you don't go either side. If you're worried about that, put some tape down to cover the card, or a piece of paper or something, because it's very easy to just to sort of, you know, brush over. And then we're going to do exactly the same with this one, just being careful not to go onto the card itself. And this time I'm going to have the light a little bit lower down than the mauve one, so about there. So now that's given me a frame, I can go in a bit darker. This colour is called indigo, and the lovely thing about indigo is, depending on how much you put on your baby wipe and how hard you press, you can get from a lovely sort of sky blue to a very dark, intense blue. And I use it a lot. This one and royal blue, I think, are my favourites out of the Versacolor. I use them all the time. So we're just blending that down. And because this is a darker colour, you can see that the similar things happened as it did with the red one, where you have those little striation marks. So what I'm going to do is just blend that down, just like I did before with a brush. Just blend those out so you've got a nice smooth finish. Now, I probably would do that a little bit darker, but you know, for the purpose of the video and time, I'm going to leave it like that. And again, as I did before, just running a line with the fineliner around the outside shape. And again, I'm going to add some blue, because this is the vintage bowl, it's got this little cap at the top. I'm going to add a bit of blue there, like that. And then just pop a fine line around that again, just to make sure that's defined. Okay. So I'm going to clean my hands and then carefully lift off this tape. Like that. And there you can see we've got our 3 bulbs. Now, obviously, we need to create a little hanging thing here for these. So we just draw them in like that. And I am going to fill in these in a little while with, but I'm using a Posca pen for that. So I'm going to do that last, because obviously that might smudge. So now we're going to put in our mice. And the first one we're going to do, I think I've shown you this technique before. I'm just going to take a little bit of acetate, which I need to do the impression upside down. So we're going to put this little mouse standing on this bauble, and then we're going to do his reflection in the bauble. So I'm just going to clean off the black I've already got on this stamp. It's important that your stamping block's clean when you start this. Just going to dry it off a little bit, and then we do this with versafine nocturne. Okay, and I'll show you how I do it. So you stamp lots of ink, because as I said, we don't want to press too hard. Move that out the way, and then we want him to be standing about there on this bauble, and then just hold it for a couple of seconds in place, and there we've got a lovely impression. Wipe your hands again, just in case you have black on them, because we've now got quite a lot of white space on this card. And then ideally you wouldn't put a piece of paper over what you just stamped, but I'm doing this so you can see what I'm doing. And some of you have seen this technique before, some of you haven't. So this is the way we get a reverse impression. You stamp like we did before, lots of ink. And then this is the tricky bit, because acetate slides. So hold your acetate with one hand and hold your other stamp firmly with the other, and then press your impression down onto the... Now, I would say that slid. I think it slid too much to create a nice impression. So I'm going to start again. And it might take you a couple of goes. If you've not done this before, I would practice on a piece of paper first, because, you know, once you've done it, that's better. Okay, so now we take that impression and we line them up as best we can to the impression above, and then we just take the heel of our pen or the nib and just rub that like you would a transfer. And then if you just lift the acetate carefully, you'll see, and that's the impression. Now, don't worry if it's not a perfect impression, because it wouldn't be anyway, would it? So, you know, as long as you've got the idea there. So that's our first mouse. Now, the other mice, we're going to stand on top, so they don't need an impression, because you wouldn't see that. So we're going to put our first one standing right on the tip here, like that. Just wiping my hands. And then we're going to use our other one, who's facing the other way, on this tip here. And again, he doesn't need a reverse because he's not near the actual bauble. And when you've done that, we're going to create little ties going up. So we want them going up to the branches. And that one. And then, like before, I did little bows on them. As I said, there is a bow stamp if you're not confident doing this, but to be honest, it doesn't have to be perfect, does it? It's just a little, I mean, as long as people get the idea. And then what we do is just extend that there to make it look like the mouse. He looks like he's tying it anyway, and it just run it through his hands. So, because that's the idea of the card, it's called All Tied Up. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit of green around the edges, because I think with this card it looks a little bit stark without it. So I'm just going to use a bit of Versacraft pine and a brush, and I'm just going to brush my brush like this. I'm going to run it off onto a piece of paper and then just go carefully around the edges. Now, if you want to, you can do this before you start. The only trouble with doing that is you don't really know until you've done the pine branch where your baubles are going to go. So I think this probably is the best way. And you only have to do a little bit. So it's really just to take that, you know, soften up the white. And the reason I want to do that on this card is because the baubles and the mice are the main feature. And sometimes if you leave it too white, it detracts from that a little bit. Let's just get rid of that dust on there. And then we're just going to go carefully around the top. And I think you get the idea. I would probably put a little bit more on, spend a little bit more time doing that, but you get the idea now. Okay, so I'm going to use my white signo pen, just run that off, and to make my marks. And these are the highlight marks. Again, I think I told you in the previous video, what would be a good thing now is to go off and leave your all your inks to dry properly, because this is what tends to happen if you're trying to mark over wet ink. And it's, as I said in the other video, if you keep going over and over it, it can actually move the paper. So I'm just, obviously I'm showing you now because it's a video, but I would, if I was doing this when I'm not making a video, I would definitely let this dry properly. So we're just going to add a couple there. There are different ways of doing this. Obviously it's up to you. All it's meant to do is reflect light bouncing off the bauble. So that's why, see there, I've gone over the reflection because it's a light mark, so it would go over the reflection. Then we'll just fill that one in a little bit more. And then I'm just going to, now you see Wendy has put these little black marks on these. I'm just going to use a bit of paper because I don't want to mark the rest of this. She's put little black dots on here on the bulbs. So where the black marks are, just add a touch of white. And that's for exactly the same reason as the baubles. It just is supposed to imitate the light bouncing like that. And also, if you want to, you can add white to the pine branches. I'm not going to do that today because mainly because of time, but it does look quite pretty if you do that, especially obviously this is a Christmas card. Now, because I'm absolutely rubbish at drawing straight lines, I'm actually going to use a ruler for this. You don't have to. You see here, you can just join these up like that. This one, I'm just going to get my ruler and draw a line up. And the same with this one. Now, you'll see that the line is slightly short of the end of the bulb, and I think that is the way it should be. So don't try and join it up to there, because it would look, I don't think it would look right. And then also here, I'm going to do this freehand. We just do a little slant there and there. And you can hardly see this one, so it doesn't really matter, but and bring that down to there. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a gold Posca pen. This is, usually when you use Posca pens, you need to prime them a little bit, which means you just need to tap lightly like that until the ink starts coming through. And then we'll just fill in where we want our gold, which on this one will be there and there. And again, this is entirely up to you. You don't have to do it gold. If you don't have a gold Posca pen, just do a little bit of colour, or, you know, it's entirely up to you. I quite like the gold because I think it just adds a little bit of richness. So put that there, and then I'm going to do that cap there as well. That's it. And then just to finish off, I'm just going to go back around the bottom and make that just a little bit darker. Now I know where it ends, I can come up a little bit. And I'm just going to try, see if that's dried a little bit better, and highlight these again. There. Okay, so that's the way I made this card. And you can see, you know, it's very slim. I've used slightly different colours in the lights. And obviously the colours you use for your baubles is entirely up to you. But I think this is a good way to get into doing the baubles. If you're not used to it, you just keep practicing and practicing. And what you'll find is that you'll find techniques that you prefer yourself and the inks you prefer to do them. And then you can just, you know, adjust them whichever way you want to. You can make them more or less as complicated as you want to. So I hope that's been of some help. Thank you for watching. I hope to welcome you along the next time.